Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of The Art of Space Engineering. This episode continues my Q&A session with Lyle, Campbell and Andrea Sportillo from the Polytechnic University of Milan in Italy, in which we discuss what went into getting the Phoenix CubeSat up and running at ASU. More specifically, this episode will cover how our team was structured and a few things that I would do differently if I were to do a CubeSat project all over again. So if you're part of a CubeSat team that's trying to start a mission of your own, then I hope that you find this episode useful. And if you still have questions afterwards, as always, please feel free to shoot me an email. And with that, let's dive right back into the conversation.
How much, where the question's here somewhere. Yeah, there it is. What level of guidance came from your supervisors, the JPL staff, and how much was driven by like the team members, yourselves?
Yeah, let's see. So really at the end of the day, a lot of Phoenix was the students. Our mentors were, so I guess the structure of the team is that, you know, for organization, we had a Slack. And so we had a Slack that we would post things to. Our mentors, our ASU mentors are fairly active on that. And so they would kind of help monitor things and answer questions. Their time is limited, but when it really came down to the wire, they were there, and they were there to provide guidance and input. And it was I would say that was one of the things that helped the most with making sure that Phoenix came together on time was having that guidance, because even with things like logistically things that you're doing, or ways to debug certain things, or like even features that you need in your CubeSat you may not have thought of, a lot of things really just come with experience. And so it's very useful to have mentors who have either worked on similar projects, or just kind of know what to look out for, and things to ask questions on, is very useful. And so that's one of the places where they were able to offer a lot of oversight, is really just kind of helping me and helping everyone else make sure that we were kind of checking all of the boxes and doing that efficiently. So they were active on Slack, and then mainly we had a weekly meeting where everyone was present, including our faculty mentors. We would just go through status, and they would ask questions. And so that was really just like the main day when they were active. And then for the rest of the week, it was just us solving problems as need be, and getting additional guidance along the way. So mostly it was the students. Our mentors from JPL and other places were really, they weren't in those weekly meetings, but we did have people come in for our design reviews, to kind of make sure that, when we were giving the big updates, they were there to provide input. And that's also because, too, like if you get other people involved from outside, you may have to pay them depending on, what their time is like. With ASU, we have a CAP partnership with JPL. I forget what the CAP I forget what the CAP is an acronym for, but it is a partnership with the university where you basically, you get a certain amount of funding for the academic year, and that will pay for people's time to come and give you advice. And so with that partnership, we were able to get people for design reviews, for them to give their input. Or if it was things like, we've never done a TVAC test before, and how do we structure this? What are other things that we need to look out for when it comes to, dealing with environmental tests or flight integration? Like things that we had never heard of before were, the aerothin compounds that you need for conformal coating and staking. And so we were able to schedule some time with our mentors in JPL to get their input on some of those processes. And that's kind of where a lot more of their time came in, was more of these kind of isolated meetings. And then the other thing that we were very lucky to have with the CAP partnership was mentoring sessions with thermal engineer Belinda Schreckengost. She met with our thermal team weekly to kind of go through the design and make sure that help the team learn thermal desktop and understand
Yeah.
how to do analyses properly in that, how to check their analyses. And so that was the biggest, I think, chunk of time that we really got from anyone outside of the university was for that. And that's kind of where a lot of our additional mentorship came in, aside from our faculty mentors.
Okay, great. How did you structure the team? Like, did you have like a kind of like a senior engineer, then team leaders, and then members below them? And yeah, how did you structure your team, and how did you manage the knowledge handover as people came and left?
Yeah. So the basic structure of the team was that you had, so we did have team leads for all of the major subsystems, and then people under them. And really the job of the team lead was essentially to, take ownership for that particular subsystem and make sure that, things were being organized in terms of making sure that we were meeting our requirements, or getting things tested. So like, the software team lead is going to take a lot more responsibility for making sure that the other team members are meeting with people from the other subsystems, really understanding how those can't talk this morning, subsystems work, and making sure that that gets translated into code. So your spacecraft is going to be doing, it does everything that it needs to. Versus, the ADCS team lead is going to be a lot more responsible for doing the actual simulations, or making sure that all of the appropriate simulations are getting done to make sure that you understand your attitude control very well, how you operate your attitude control system. If you're purchasing hardware off the shelf, there's firmware that you'll have to configure that you need to make sure is configured correctly, and the coordinate frames match up, so that way when your spacecraft thinks it's pointing at the sun, it actually is pointing at the sun, or the solar panels are actually pointing at the sun. So it's keeping track of a lot of the little things like that, and then kind of delegating, making sure that people are doing the tasks that they've been given. So we had team leads for those, and then other people helping out underneath them. And then kind of more at the top, you have your like systems engineers, and project manager, people like me who were kind of looking at all of the other subsystems and saying, okay, this is how the system needs to come together, and this is how it's currently coming together, and is all of that being done A, efficiently, and B, are we checking all of the boxes that we need to right now? And if not, what are some of the ways that we need to change things, so that way, we are working as efficiently as we possibly can. And that could even it could even be that what am I trying to say? So with software, for example, one of the ways that we really, software is probably the place where efficiency matters the most, and you really want to make sure that you're the right people are working, people who are strong in certain areas are working on the right thing, so that way that can come together efficiently. That makes any sense. So that's kind of where, the systems engineers kind of floated at the top, and then our faculty mentors were above that, making sure that, as the faculty mentors were kind of overseeing things and making sure that, the students have appropriate support when they need it, they have appropriate guidance when they need it. But for the most part, our faculty mentors were, aside from the meetings, they were very, they were hands on when we needed them for debugging. For the most part, it was the students, it was really student driven, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But when Jed and Danny, who are our faculty mentors, really had to be there to help with debugging or help us just understand, like, why isn't this working? What don't we understand? They were there. And so that's kind of how we had things structured differently between faculty being involved versus more of your student management, and then the actual like the rest of the subsystems themselves. And then for things like licensing and other kinds of like logistical paperwork was stuff that I handled as the PM. So like all of the, NOAA licensing, FCC licensing, and then direct contact with like NASA, LSP, and NanoRacks was mostly me.
Okay, and so you use Slack for like regular communications. Did you use that for everything, or was there something else you used to keep track of all the important documents, or was it all?
No, that's a good question. So we use Slack mostly for communication and just for DMs. It is important to keep track of what you're doing, all of the work that you're doing, though. So we developed this later in the project timelines. We weren't always doing this, but we found it we started doing memos to keep track of large tasks that we were working on. So let's say you were gearing up for, to do a qualification test on your EPS subsystem, or your ADCS team was doing an analysis on, with the hardware and making sure that, when you send our ADCS system the proper commands, it's doing exactly what we expect it to. Any specific, milestone or task that we had, we would write a memo for. We would document what we did in the memo, the outcomes, and any other relevant information that was necessary. And so with those, we tried to make them a lot more detailed to make sure that when anyone who would open it and read it would understand what you did. And so that's a really good way to keep track of the work that you've done and the outcomes of it, because later on, when you have to think about, oh, I did, like, what was this value that we got from this one test? You have something to go back and reference. And so that's one very good way to keep track of just the work that you've done itself. And it's also a very good way to onboard people when they come on. So if someone if someone's onboarded to your payload team and they want to learn about all of the work that's been done so far, say, go look at the memos and read all of them, and ask questions about what you don't understand. Then that helps facilitate a lot of that, self onboarding that I mentioned earlier, to kind of say, okay, this is what we've done. Go learn it and understand it, and then that kind of relieves your team to keep doing what they're doing while the new people kind of get up to speed and what have you. It's also useful for design reviews. Like if you have test pictures and stuff like that in there, you can just grab them and kind of throw them in. Helps things come together a lot quickly once, if you do all of the heavy work up front. So we would do things like memos for scheduling. A lot of, in the industry, you'll see a lot of people use Gantt charts. We found that to be extremely ineffective because, this is the first time we've ever done something like this. And so Gantt charts were changing all of the time. And they're very useful, but I found it to be a lot of work to, reconfigure them every time we were learning something different. So what we ended up doing is we did everything in Google Drive. And because it was a centralized place that everyone could access, if I didn't have to send a Gantt chart out every week to update people with where things were, you could just go to the drive, open up the spreadsheet, and you would see, okay, this is what everyone's working on right now. This is the, level of completion, partially completed, or percent, whatever works best for you. We did that in the form of a spreadsheet. And so we would list out all of the tasks that we were working on, the initial deadline for them, like a final deadline for them, and keep track of things in there. And then kind of set milestones to occur set large milestones for every 2 weeks or so. So that way, we were trying to push ourselves in saying, okay, we really need this done by the state, this large milestone done by the state, but also trying to be a little more realistic with being students, and setting these goals for short time periods to set at least reasonable deadlines for the things that we needed to do. So we really tried to make things as transparent as possible in terms of how, what information people had access to it and where they could get to it. And that just proved to be very efficient for us in kind of keeping organized through the process. And then once it came time for when we're doing a lot of our software development on GitHub, we use the GitHub issues to track a lot of the specific software issues that we were working on, or software tasks that we were working on. So we use that more so than memos when it, for software related issues. So yeah, that was kind of mostly what we would do. And then we would have, other major documents that would, like our requirements that would detail, okay, these are all of the requirements for the project. These are the things that are nice to have versus the things that are absolutely necessary. And then trackers for other, tests and things that we were measuring, just to kind of make sure we were checking all of the boxes and keeping track of, how long does it take to download an image, or how big is this file? Things that are very useful to know for the operations phase. So that way, if you don't have like a flat set to keep testing, you have an idea of how long things are going to take and what to expect.
Sure. My last two questions. I think you mentioned in one of the reports I read that you got in touch with some like local amateur radio operators and astronomers for like, was that for help with the ground station, or just help contacting the satellite when it's out of view of you guys?
Yeah. So they can help with ground station with, if you're having issues with configuring your ground station, you can always contact the AMSAT community and people will help. We mostly used the AMSAT community, and because our ground station was already set up at that point, we mostly used the AMSAT community and the SatNogs database for basically tracking Phoenix when it was not over the ASU ground station. And they're also extremely helpful for just preparing for actually deploying your CubeSat from the ISS. Because once your CubeSat's deployed, the very first task that you have to do is figure out which one is yours. And so the more people that you have aware that your CubeSat is being deployed, the more people can listen to it and help you figure out, okay, out of the 10 CubeSats that were just deployed, which one is Phoenix? And so, because with the SatNogs database, the admins for that are very they're very experienced, because they've done it so many times in figuring out which TLE set belongs to your CubeSat. And so once they understand that, then that helps you kind of update other people with, okay, if you want to track the spacecraft, like use this TLE set, and then you can ping it, or just listen for its health beacon. And so it really helps to just get as many people involved as possible to, especially in the beginning, to make sure that your CubeSat is alive and responsive, and troubleshoot things as necessary. So like when we initially had our anomaly, we were trying to just transmit commands and see what was working, what responses we would get for certain commands. And so there were people from the AMSAT community that helped us transmit harmless commands that would just return status, not do anything really operational. And so that allowed us to kind of divide the work between, us sending things and then people on the other side of the US sending things. Because, you only really get 2 passes a day. So having the more people who can help you debug stuff is the better. So that's really where the amateur radio community came in handy with us. But there are people who will ask questions all the time about, hey, I have this this SDR that I'm trying to set up, and what do you recommend in terms of trying to just listen for satellites and decode their beacons? There are plenty of people who do that and who are willing to help you figure that out when the time comes.
Sure. Final question from me. What things would you have done differently, technically or organizationally, if you had the time again?
Oh boy. Let's see. Technically, so I think in terms of the technical side of things, I think we would kind of just, it would have been nice to have started off with the mentality that we had and the knowledge that we had. So I think if you were to take the same team that finished Phoenix now and start a brand new CubeSat, you have people who have a much better understanding of how to properly define requirements. So like level 1 versus level 2, how does that flow work? And yeah, and what's necessary and what really isn't necessary, because once you really understand your requirements, like the rest of the project is just making sure that you meet those. Even like with software, for example, like your software should just be able to take your requirements list and kind of go down and check all of those boxes. You don't necessarily need to have like, let's see, yeah. So having a very good understanding of requirements up front, I think would have helped us a lot. So I think if I were to like go back to the person I was and advise myself now, I probably would have, make sure the NASA Systems Engineering Handbook has a very good outline for what does a good requirement look like? What is the difference between level 1 versus level 2, level 3, and so on. So I would say make sure that your team looks at that, really looks at that and understands it, and have a very detailed systems requirements review for all of the requirements that you set for yourself, and make sure that the goals and objectives that you're setting for yourself are as good as they possibly need to be. And because if you set yourself up on the right foundation, then it makes a lot of things a lot easier. We did do a systems requirements review when we started, but I don't know. I think we were all just so new to everything. There were a lot of things that we didn't catch. And so having people, who have developed a CubeSat before, and kind of know specifically what to look out for, are good to have in that room when it comes time to actually hold that kind of review. So those are a couple of things to consider, is making sure that you kind of get the right input, you start off on the right foot, and everyone's kind of coordinated from the beginning. Let's see. Logistically, I think we were set up pretty good logistically. We should have done memos earlier than we did. I think that would have helped with onboarding a lot, because we started those fairly late in the project. So starting those from the beginning would have been useful. Let's see. And then really just, I think, kind of delegating more of the smaller tasks that you can, to make sure that people aren't spreading themselves too thin. Keeping track of things like how long people are working on something, to make sure that like 3 weeks hasn't gone by and you're like, oh, we still haven't resolved this one thing. So kind of keeping a tracker of how long you've actually had to, had an issue, or have just had kind of something sitting off to the side is good to kind of know to start doing from the beginning. But yeah, so I think, apart from having a better understanding of what's absolutely necessary, and what our goals are from the beginning, that's really the major thing that I think I would change. And then everything kind of just fell into place as it did. I would say from a project management side, you yeah, keeping track of progress and what's working efficiently and what's not, and what work is everyone doing, what questions aren't being asked, what teams aren't talking to each other, and should they be talking to each other. That's also very important. So like in the beginning, I would say like our software team wasn't interacting a whole lot with with the other subsystems and understanding kind of how all of those worked. We were all in the beginning all very separate kind of from one another in terms of work. And so it was like, oh, the comms team's doing this, software team's doing that. And that's not really what you want for a team. Everyone kind of has to be a systems engineer and really understand what's going on with all of the other subsystems, because at the end of the day, a lot of subsystems impact other ones. And so knowing what to look out for is really important. And so making sure everyone kind of, everything is transparent and everyone's up to speed. And people are having the right conversations is important. And the more people who really get into it and really help keep track of everything, the easier it becomes for things to come together, I'll say. So that's, I would say that's one logistical thing that is useful to make sure that you have in a team is the fact that, you have a lot of people who are paying attention and have a very good understanding of what the system looks like as a whole. Because at the end of the day, that's really how everything comes together.
Oh, perfect.
That's all
Thanks.
I can think of.
Yeah, I think Andrea had a question now.
Yes, sorry, I have only small questions. So the first one is a clarification about the software. So you talk about the software and you put a lot of effort on that. It was because of the fact that that was included in the payload, or it is actually the software is an important part in the development of the CubeSat itself, without considering the payload?
Yeah, the software is, your software is basically your spacecraft. And I like to say it, I think maybe that was something that Danny had said once, and I'm just now carrying on to everyone I talk to. But really, it really is, because anything that your CubeSat needs to do, it's all done through software commands. If you need to turn on a power rail, or if you need to tell your ADCS to track a target or track the sun, all of those are software related commands. And so maybe you're not developing, so in our case, all of our hardware was commercial off the shelf. So we didn't have to program our, the controllers on our ADCS to do certain things. We just had to write the top level flight software that would send commands to all of the components, the proper commands to all of the components to tell them what to do. But even with that, there's still a lot that you have to take into consideration, with logistically, everything you need to just make that work. Because not only do you need all of the commands you need to make sure all of the commands work smoothly and output the right response. And you need to make sure that all of the commands you could ever possibly want to use are included in there, or you could have something like what we developed was MOPS pass-through. MOPS stands for mission ops in this case. And so this was just like raw bytes that we could send to the hardware that would, if the bytes were correct, it would do the command that was already pre-programmed onto the hardware. And so this really just prevented us from saying, okay, if you send this particular command code and these particular parameters, it will take all of those and then, execute this command. And so that was kind of a quick way to make sure that, okay, we can tell this component to do everything that it could possibly do, but we don't have time to implement every single one of those. So there's implementing commands, and then there's also doing a lot of the overhead, just kind of logistical things that you need that are specific to your mission. And the biggest areas where this becomes a lot of work is with comms, especially. So like for us, with we're saving images, we're saving all of this telemetry. Eventually, we need to transmit that to our ground station. We need to make sure that it reliably gets there from it reliably gets from point A to point B. And so we ended up developing, you know, kind of this communication protocol ourselves that would kind of take files, separate them, transmit them out, allow for us to do things like re-request files if the whole file wasn't received. So it's things like that when it comes down to what is your specific, what are your specific operations that you're going to be doing? What are the things that would make the operations phase easier for you to do? Ground commands to like reset your spacecraft, for example, or update the onboard clock. There's going to be a bunch of small things that you'll think of that are just really useful to make your mission as effective as possible. And so that's where the flight software really becomes a lot of work, is just making sure that it's robust.
Thank you very much. Okay, so just to recap the important points that I got so far. So the requirement definition is very important. Keep track of all the progresses that we have done so far. So the development, the motivation to justify what we are going to do. So to have memos of what we have done and why we are going to do something else about it. And then the communication in between the people in the team. Is that okay? I just have a small question about the meetings that you had with your team outside, not considering the mentors. Did you meet periodically? I don't know, each week, each month, or how did you manage this part?
Yeah, that really changes with where you are in your project timeline. So at the beginning, when Phoenix first started out, we were just having weekly meetings. And so these were our weekly, you know, all hands on deck team meetings where everyone would kind of get together. We would just talk about status, go through any issues that people were having, and talk things out as we needed to. And then the subsystem teams would meet throughout the week separately so they could kind of get their work done, resolve things, you know, go over their internal schedule, update. This was a nice thing about the spreadsheet that we made that kind of tracked all of our milestones, is that in each subsystem meeting, they could just go into that spreadsheet and update it with, okay, this is what we're working on, this is where we currently are. And so that kind of allows everyone to interact with the schedule and really understand what that schedule is, as opposed to it being controlled by one person. I found that was helpful in kind of helping communicate things to people. And you may have to make, like, I don't know, additional diagrams or other, you know, supplementary material to help communicate things along the way, but having that be transparent was useful, at least we found. So the subsystems would have their own weekly meetings, then we would have our team meetings. When it really came down to the wire, we were doing a lot of the software development. We had daily meetings, actually, and really these meetings were just like our lab time. So we just said, okay, you know, Monday through Friday, lab time is going to be from like 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. And you don't have to be there from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. But like, if you go in this time, someone should be there, and, you know, just come in when you can and work on whatever you can. And when you got to leave, you got to leave, because we all understand that, you know, students have classes. And, you know, and your primary goal is to graduate. So that's understandable. But we kind of made sure that someone was kind of always there, and that allows people to talk with each other, tag up with each other, ask questions. So that was kind of like our, you know, daily meeting that we had. I know a lot of other teams too will do like, you know, daily internal calls when you get down to really critical points. We've also done these for my work, where you know, when we're having really big issues and we have to solve them, it's kind of like we'll have these daily tag ups where everyone gets on the phone and we just talk through the current status, we talk through the issues we're having, and then everyone tries to solve them and everyone asks questions. So it's kind of like you've got all of these heads together, and how do you solve problems? So that's kind of how we broke things up. And once you get, so in the beginning, it's a lot more relaxed. And then towards the end, you'll be meeting a lot more frequently. But even in the beginning, it's good to still try, if you're having working meetings, still try to have those lab times where like people can just kind of come in and work, because that really just helps to kind of encourage the, collaboration within the team as a whole. And, making sure that everyone's kind of understanding how things are coming together. So that would be my recommendation there. And I guess kind of going back to, the question where it was like, what would you do differently? I probably would have had, more of those group meetings in the beginning. We were initially working on things because everyone was very separate in the beginning, and that slowed down our schedule, I think.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions we had.
Sweet. But yeah, if you think of any more, feel free to email me.
Thank you very much for having dedicated so much time to us poor people.
No, I like doing this. It's definitely one of the things I've liked the most about Phoenix Ending, is getting to tell people all of the ways that we've broken things, and done things wrong. Because we really didn't talk to like other CubeSat teams when we started, and I think if we had done that, we would have started off on a better page. So yeah, you guys are doing the right thing.
Okay.
That's good to hear. Okay, yeah, well, thanks a lot for your time again. Have a good sleep and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, and ciao.
Ciao.
Take care, guys.
And thank you all for tuning in to The Art of Space Engineering. That's all for today's episode. If you're starting a CubeSat project of your own, I really hope this episode was helpful to you. While we covered a lot in this episode, there is a heck of a lot more that goes into starting one of these from scratch. So I plan to work on a few more episodes that cover more of the earlier stages of Phoenix, some of the realities of developing CubeSats as an undergraduate student team, and how/where we spent our time, how long things took. As always, if you have any questions and are interested in talking to me more about Phoenix, then please feel free to shoot me an email. I can talk about this project for days, and I'm always happy to help. If you've been enjoying this podcast, don't forget to follow The Art of Space Engineering on your favorite podcast platform, like it on Facebook for further updates, and I'll catch you fellow CubeSat nerds in the next episode. Here's looking forward to future adventures and the lessons learned from them. Cheers, Sarah.